privilege to welcome someone with just a fantastic first name. One could say the best first name. Jason Stein, although I am partial. He's the research director for the Wisconsin Policy Forum, longtime reporter here in Madison, based here in Madison. In the Policy Forum, we got to thank Rob Henkin, who is on today, the president CEO of Wisconsin Policy Forum, doing amazing work and really doing a lot more in Madison. And Rob and Jason, this is your third report on the City of Madison budget. We're excited to hear more about what the budget has in store. We have got a great relationship with the forum, so we're excited to have them here today. Jason's going to go over the report. We're going to have plenty of time for question and answer at the end. So Jason, welcome and good morning, and thank you for making me look bad by putting a sport coat on that I did not do this morning, so I apologize.
No, thanks so much for having me. We really appreciate getting to partner with DMI on talks like these. You know, DMI is it's a great organization, and it's really helps us meet our own mission of getting information out there about the fiscal condition of the city budget, all of that. For those of you who, I think most of you know this, but for those of you who might not, the forum is a nonpartisan organization. We've been around, at least we were formed by a merger in 2018, but we had organizations that have been around going back to World War I. So we are not a Johnny-come-lately group. We include local governments, school districts, nonprofits, businesses, business associations, individuals. Anybody can join and be welcomed in. We do have our reports on our website as well. So if you want to check out if I do a good enough job that you just really want to check out this entire report, when I'm done, you can go to our website and click on the research tab and do that. So without further ado, I'm going to attempt to share my screen here. Can everybody see that?
Looks great. Looks great, Jay.
Okay, perfect. So we have an interactive for the City of Madison budget, and we did this for the City of Milwaukee budget. We put out an interactive tab. One of the things we every year do budget briefs on the City of Madison budget, City of Milwaukee budget, Milwaukee County, Milwaukee Public Schools, and the Madison Metropolitan School District. We've had some people approach us about maybe doing the same thing for Dane County, but that's sort of Dane County's budget. But as of yet, we have not pulled the trigger on that. And this is a little interactive that we put together to sort of give you the highlights of both city budget briefs. I'm only going to show you the City of Madison, but the City of Milwaukee's is right there whenever you want to look at it. So the big picture for the City of Madison budget this year and in recent years is that it has faced budget shortfalls, both going into the budget process and then once the budget process has already started. And at least for the last couple of years, those have been growing. And I think there's reason to think that they are going to continue. The blue lines there at the bottom represent the initial budget gap that the mayor and city council are facing every year before they finalize the budget. So this is, and for 2022, it was 18 million. So this fall it was 18 million. Essentially what this is just, you look at the cost to continue present city services. Then you look at the new revenue that the city can expect to get from state aid, from the increase to its property tax that it's allowed under state levy limits. You do all the math on that, and this is the amount that the new revenue of the new costs that the new revenues do not cover. So this is the gap before the mayor or city council would approve any new program. And what you can see as well is that after closing budget gaps in the previous 2 years, including drawing $8 million out of the general fund balance or out of our our rainy day funds as a city, they had gaps of 11 million and about 5 million open up in these two in 2020 and 2021 because of COVID. And that would be because of things like, transit really struggling during the pandemic. Parking utility has really struggled during the pandemic. Anything related to tourism, like both the room tax collections that support a variety of entertainment and tourism enterprises, as well as just Monona Terrace itself, have all struggled during the pandemic. And there have been then certain other things like investment income at times failed to perform for the city during the pandemic as it had been prior. So we go into this process with an $18 million gap. The city has got to close that gap in one way or another. And here you see how the mayor's proposal and the final budget from the council will look somewhat different, but here you see how the mayor's proposal would do that. Obviously, what stands out is the disproportionate or the large use of funds from the American Rescue Plan Act. There's something within the American Rescue Plan Act called the Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, and that's just a pot of fairly discretionary dollars that local governments around the country were awarded. In the case of Madison, it was 47 million. And they are using, they would use a little over 13 million this year to close that, help close that $18 million budget gap. In addition, the initial estimates on things like pension and healthcare payments, debt payments came in almost 5 million below estimates. So that helped. The city is would put in place under the budget a new urban, an increase in the urban forestry fee and a new sorting or recycling fee for properties. There would be $2 million in payments on transit debt, Madison Metro transit debt, that we would have expected at the beginning of the budget process to be paid out of the general fund. Those would be paid with other city funds instead. There would be $1 million of spending reductions. And then adding to the budget gap this year, there are some additional spending that the mayor's proposed. A big chunk of that is just for the town of Madison annexation. So as I think probably most of you know, almost 20 years ago, we reached an agreement with the city of Fitchburg and the town of Madison that most of the town of Madison would be annexed into the city in October. And so a big part of this budget is preparing the city to provide, services, first and foremost, public safety services in those scattered lands of the town. In addition, the budget does provide a 1% raise for general city employees and ends a residency rule that precluded certain compensation to certain employees if they didn't live in the city. And then there's some just additional supplemental spending, which some of that includes fire department employees, additional fire department employees. And y'all are free to toss questions in the chat, or we can just, have more of a discussion when it's done. I'm going to try and leave time for that. So where would spending rise and fall in the budget overall? Again, the biggest chunk of new spending is in the area of the annexation and certain other capital and miscellaneous expenses. There's a big chunk of there's 10 firefighters being hired. So that's your 1.5 million more going to the fire department. The city's implementing Microsoft 360. So there's a big IT cost with that. 2022 is obviously a midterm election year, so there's election costs for the clerk. There's an increase, as we talked about, in police, largely for the town of Madison annexation. And then there's some decrease in general fund spending in areas like public works. Now, again, this is general fund spending, So in actuality, the public works spending is not going down, but it's being paid for to a greater degree by these new fees that I talked about. So not an actual decrease in public works spending, but a decrease in general fund spending. Property taxes would be, at their lowest level, at least under the proposal since 2003, the mayor's proposal. The actual levy increase, I think, is going to be somewhat higher because of some of the things that the council is doing and has done, but it's still going to be quite low. So in this chart, you can really see when the state tightened levy limits in 2011, you can see how much property tax increases, have typically been below 4% since that limit was put in place. The tighter limit was put in place in 2011, and they, we're I think routinely above 4% in the 15 years before that. We can talk a little bit more about, in the last couple of years, the state levy limit has really held property taxes to a lower degree, and I'll show you. Well, I'll talk to you a little bit about why later, but it has to do with the fact that we're just not seeing, as we have not in the past couple of years seen as much new construction in the city, which levy limits are tied to. In terms of the capital budget would be, so far we've been talking about the operating budget. The capital budget would return to levels that you saw in sort of the mid teens, so 2017, 18, and 19, after a couple down years. The big reason for the increase in the capital budget this year is bus rapid transit. So that project would cost about $166 million overall. It would be about $143 million in 2022. The great majority of that would be federally funded in 2022. So that accounts for most of your increase in the capital budget next year under the proposal. So I talked a little bit before about ARPA funding. And so here is just a look at these local fiscal recovery fund dollars to the what are turned in the legislation, I think, metropolitan cities around Wisconsin. So the obviously the big standout is Milwaukee. The federal formula prioritized areas with high poverty, aging housing overcrowding. And so under this formula, Milwaukee did very well on a per capita basis, nearly $700 per capita. The average for these cities in Wisconsin was about $400 per capita. Madison was a little under $200 per capita. So we got the second largest award in the state in raw dollars at $47 million. But in per capita terms, it was, for Madison, smaller than many other cities in the state. Here's how the budget would use the vast majority of these $47 million in fiscal recovery funds. So as you can see, in 2021 and 2022, just over half of the fiscal recovery funds would be used to close gaps in our general fund and in the room tax fund that covers costs such as Destination Madison, the Overture Center, certain costs. Traditionally has covered certain costs of the zoo, Monona Terrace, things like that. So that is really more than half of the pie goes to that. About a fifth goes to addressing homelessness. So you can see that 18% right here. The darker colors, like what you see right here, are capital spending, and then the lighter colors are operating spending. Then about 14% goes for affordable housing, about 8% for, about that goes to neighborhood and small business revitalization, violence prevention and youth programming is about 5%. One thing to know about Madison's approach to these ARPA dollars is that the city is going, set to spend the vast majority of the fiscal recovery fund by the end of 2022. Now, there are certain other cities like Milwaukee that will have significant amounts going that will last into 2023. They started with more as well, but that is a potential challenge for the city, that if the hits from the pandemic have not totally resolved themselves by 2023, there will not be any of these real discretionary ARPA dollars to help the city. Overall, if you look at all the federal funding that has come in so far from both the federal government and the state on pass-through, the city of Madison has received more than $190 million. The biggest chunks of that have been for transit and for these recovery funds. And there will still be some significant transit funding into 2024. So that is a benefit to Madison Metro, but you are going to see, the city is going to have to turn to other things moving, once it starts to move out of the next budget year. Okay, so I talked about Madison Metro. Here's just a look in one chart at the real challenge that Metro Transit officials have faced. So you see here that in around 2014, 2015, you had ridership peak in the fall at about 1.6 million riders. Since the pandemic, it's never risen above about 400,000 riders in a month. So it's just been a really precipitous drop in transit. Obviously, transit always bounces around. So these lower months are during the summer where you don't have students, but it's taken a tremendous hit from the pandemic, and it's unclear. The Metro Transit hopes to see ridership return to pre-pandemic levels in 2024, but obviously before COVID-19, the mayor had a vision for transit that included, for Madison Metro, that included building out bus rapid transit and growing ridership to about a third higher than it was in, I think, 2018 levels. Obviously, that's going to be just returning now to the ridership that we had pre-pandemic is a big task. I think that's something to watch as we think about, can we sustainably fund these the new BRT services once those come online. Madison Metro says that, yes, we can do that, that they think by just simply eliminating existing routes that share some of the same roads as the planned BRT service, which would run from Easttown to Westtown malls, that is going to be something they're going to be able to accomplish. But obviously, it's something to watch. I see some questions in the chat. I'm almost done here, so I'll just wrap up and then I'll look at those. Thanks for your patience. Here's another big pandemic impact. These are room taxes in Madison, going back for the past decade. So what you see is just the tremendous hit that they took in 2020, and the fact that so far in 2021, they have recovered more slowly than was initially expected. And it could be still, we could be still a year and a half, 2 years or more away from, even just returning to 2019 levels in the room tax. Again, that further complicates the challenges that city institutions like Monona Terrace, the Overture, Destination Madison, the challenges of their own that they've had because of the pandemic. Room taxes have been a key funding source for those things. A portion of room taxes also goes into the general fund to help fund services like public safety. Obviously, those have also been affected over the past couple of years. Okay, So, and by the way, if you looked at the parking utility revenues, you'd see a similar impact, because as workers have once again stopped driving downtown as much, stopped eating out and shopping as much downtown, you're seeing impacts to the parking utility as well, which is right now, I think, scheduled to burn through its reserves by within like 12, 18 months. There's another, issue within the city budget to watch. Moving forward, city budget officials say they expect to see once again another shortfall of 18 million, roughly 18 million, open up in the fall of 2022 when we start looking at the 2023 budget. So again, this budget gets the city through would get the city through another year of the pandemic. It would not further draw down our general fund, our rainy day fund reserves. It would not cut services. It would build out, in really significant ways. It would build out BRT service. It would obviously carry through on the town of Madison annexation. So there's a lot of things that are in an unprecedented pandemic positives within the budget, but this is not a budget that will put the city on a path to not having financial challenges in the future. We are going to see, if this budget is, enacted, we are approved, we're going to see some of those challenges return a year from now. And the city is, again, we hope, going to see significant improvements in some areas like transit, room taxes, and parking, but the city is not going to have the same level of support, I think, from the federal government that they have had so far. It's certainly possible that the federal infrastructure bill will help the city, particularly in terms of its capital budget. But in terms of its operating budget, we are going to see continued headwinds for some time to come. And so now I know people have dropped some questions or comments in the chat. And so I'll take a look at those and see what other questions you have.
Do you want me to ask those questions of you, or are you reading them now? Sorry, one of them is long.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, and one good point that someone makes, that we have certainly seen route cuts from Metro Transit. We have seen cuts, at certain times we saw cuts in the library services. So I don't mean to imply that there was never any cuts to sort of any city services, but certainly, I think the city has preserved some, many of the core services. We haven't seen, for instance, big layoffs of police officers or something like that. But it certainly is the case that we have seen some cuts. And part of this current budget is getting certain things like Metro Transit back up to their previous number of routes and so on.
Then I think Bill, as you see, Jason, Bill Connor has a comment about, per Dave Schmedeke, the net new construction adjustment to the levy limit is a ratio of the value of net overall equalized value in the city. Overall equalized value includes economic adjustments, examples, appreciation of existing property values, while net new construction reflects the value of new construction less the value of property displaced by new construction. Over the past few years, the value of the existing property base has been increasing faster than the rate of change in the value of new construction.
Yeah, I think that's largely right. I mean, one thing I'll show you, I'll just show you one. There's one other chart I could show you on that. I'll do that right now. Here is the rate of net new construction in the city of Madison versus the overall average statewide rate. And what you see is that Madison has routinely outperformed the statewide average in recent years. And when we got to 2021, the figures released for January 2021, they, for the first time really in the years we have on record, the city of Madison was below the state figures for net new construction. And so that that meant that the city just wasn't going to get the increase under the state levy limits that, the city had been getting in 16, 17, 18. One thing that, I think people, those of you who work around development or just, talk to people like Dave Schmidtke, we would expect to see a higher net new construction next year. I guess it's still an open question to me what we see going forward and what will be sort of the new normal. But I do think a year from now, we will see, I think we will see a better net new construction number for the city. And that is one of the potential positives that we could see a year from now that might give the city some additional breathing room.
Bill says that. Thank you for that, for sharing the chart about the comparison between Madison and the rest of the state. And I think certainly anecdotally, and many of the members on this joint committee are in the construction industry or in the built environment industry. And I think we are seeing uptick. So we hope we continue to trend upwards. All right. What other questions do we have for Jason? The other Jason, no, I guess you can ask me questions if you want. I won't give as good of answers as he will. You can either raise your hand with the raise hand function in the reactions section, or literally, well, just raise your hand, although I can't see everybody today. We've got over 25 people. So who has questions? Quiet group today.
I'll ask one, Jason.
Perfect. Thank you, Jeff.
Both Jasons. So, I saw the graph earlier that talked about the federal fund, the $47 million, I think you said was allotted to us. I guess I was twofold. One, if I heard you correctly, we're using about $13.1 million to cover the gap. But then is the rest of the 47 going to be utilized in 2022? And the other half of that question, is there any strings attached or any guidance that is given to the utilization of those funds?
Yeah, absolutely. It can be used. So, the big thing that got some attention is you can't use those to address unfunded pension liabilities, for instance, which is something that in the case of the city of Madison is not a concern, because the city is part of the very strong Wisconsin retirement system. Those are available for addressing revenue losses from the pandemic, for providing premium pay to workers, putting into certain broadband services like broadband, water, sewer infrastructure. I think Rob can chime in if he remembers one thing that I'm missing there in terms of federal formula. But I think from what we've seen, just impacting, let's just say broadly addressing social impacts of the pandemic. From what I can see, the city is complying with the federal regulations for how it's using its ARPA funds. I can give you a little background in some of the other uses of that $192 million so far in CARES Act and ARPA and other federal pandemic relief funds. About $75 million in direct and pass-through support has been used for transit, about $39 million for rental assistance, $8.8 million for housing and community development, and $16 million for public health, which obviously those funds are shared with Dane County, since our public health entity is a shared city-county entity. And again, under the plan, when we just talked about, Jeff, you'd asked about the federal recovery dollars. Those funds are being used, I think it's 6.9 million in 2021 was being used for budget gaps, 13 million in 2022. And then there's a little bit that will still last into 2023 of $4 million that will still be available in 23 to help address shortfalls in the general fund or the room tax fund. But the majority will be allocated. So like 43 million of the 47 will be allocated in 21 and 22.
Jason, I would just one thing I would chime in, and this is a very interesting element of the ARPA legislation that few people would be interested in, but this group might. The definition of revenue loss is predicated on whether your revenue streams grew 4.1% annually. So here in Wisconsin, very few local governments see revenue growth of that amount. Yet under the definition under ARPA, you're able to count as a revenue loss. If you're a county government and your sales tax revenues fail to grow by 4.1%, you can count that gap every year for a 3-year period, and that constitutes a revenue loss. So I'm not trying to place a value judgment here, but it really does offer the opportunity then for local governments to really use these funds to just plug holes in their operating budgets, which arguably is defensible in this case, because of the operating budget pain that would otherwise occur. But it also sort of encourages bad behavior as defined by, fiscal standards, where you really shouldn't take one-time revenues and plug them into their operating budget. So it's really interesting when you look across the state to see how various local governments are using these dollars. And that's one of the things we really looked at. Jason did when looking at the Madison budget, and myself and other staff when in analyzing the Milwaukee budget. I think in both of those, in our 2 largest cities, we're sort of seeing a balance between using some to plug operating holes and hopefully using other of those amounts to do some more far-reaching things.
Thank you, Robin J. Oh,
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
go ahead, please.
Valerie asked about the slides. Like, could I share the slides? And it's better than that because they're on, that interactive is on the website. So I just put in the link in the chat. You can go and look at also the city of Milwaukee if you want, or just delve more into the city of Madison.
Jason, you're on mute.
Thank you. I was going to be a good joke. I was setting it up, and now it's going to thud. For all of you that run Zoom meetings, the key to hiring a good presenter, bringing in a good presenter, is also bringing in a presenter that's an MC. So then they just handle everything themselves. They can take care of it all. So thank you, Jason, very much. Next up, we've got Eve with a question. Good morning, Eve.
Good morning. In an effort to stay within levy limits, we're seeing a lot of increases in various fees. Remember when we used to get a water bill that had just water and sewer, and now we've got all kinds of, the bills I think should get longer just to reflect the different issue areas where there are suddenly fees for things, whether it's urban forestry or recycling. Is that a trend statewide, to see all these new fees? And how does that fit in with making, judgments about what's happening with revenue and eligibility for other funding?
That's a great question. Good to see you again, Eve. Rob could chime in for the city of Milwaukee, but I think the short answer is yes, that is a trend. The legislature in 2013 put in place a rule that you could not use new fees to offset property taxes on certain services. So there is actually pretty extensive state rules that prevent that in many cases. From what I can see, and I've talked to the city attorney's office about this, Madison has come up with an approach for urban forestry and for this recycling fee that will work and complies with the statute. But it's, that will, in the long run, put some limit on what the city's able to do, but they have some room to grow these things going forward. Rob, and I think we are seeing some increased reliance on fees statewide by local governments as their property tax levies are constrained. Rob?
Yeah, just for what it's worth, in the city of Milwaukee, that has been their source of revenue growth over the past decade is fees. And they even introduced a new street lighting fee in their budget last year that somehow was able to pass muster despite the effort by the legislature to say you can't do new fees unless you're willing to reduce your property tax levy by the same amount of the revenue generation. And, you know, we've looked at it, and I think it raises questions. Obviously, fees are very regressive in that they're, you know, they're not based on your income or necessarily your property value. On the other hand, one of the things that fees do allow municipal governments to do is tap into those entities that are not paying property taxes because they're property tax exempt and they do have to pay fees. So if you're of a mind that, you know, nonprofit hospitals, for example, or universities should be paying more and they're not because they're exempt from property taxes, at least fees is a way to get it at those types of entities.
And so, and Bill has a comment in the chat, which is correct. I mean, the chart that I just showed you shows the percentage that net new construction makes up of equalized property values in the city of Madison, and that net new construction makes up in equalized property values in, you know, the state as a whole. And it's that, you know, increase in equalized property values due to net new construction. So new construction minus any value that has been, you know, lost when buildings are torn down, that represents what under state law is the allowable increase in the operating property taxes used for operations. There's also, you can still increase property taxes to cover debt payments outside of the levy limits, and there's certain other exemptions as well. But I mean, I think, and I think part of the point that Bill's making is as your equalized values become greater, you need more and more new construction to give you the same percentage increase that you had before. So that is certainly, you know, a challenge for the city is, again, you have to continually come up with this new construction and even slightly more new construction than before if you want to increase your levy by as large of a percentage as you did before. Now, again, the same thing is true that your levy base gets bigger, so your amount you get in new property taxes is also greater. But I mean, you know, I don't want to belabor it too much, but the point just being that it has become more difficult for the city over time to get to get a 3.5%, 4%, 4.5%, you know, increase in the overall property tax levy. And a big part of that is just what happens with net new construction over time.
I'm truly hoping there will not be a quiz after this. I'm lost in the math already. Okay, so one question that I have is about the 5 of the key areas that you have in the budget. 3 key areas really do affect downtown directly, right? You have transit ridership, you have parking, and you have room tax being down. In talking to Dave Schmedeke and preparing this report, where do they forecast those 3 items, which are so pivotal for downtown, right? We saw normally, I think in 2019, there was $304 million worth of economic impact from tourism downtown, and it fell all the way to $120 million. We lost over 2,000 employees in that area. Just as one example, parking is significantly down. Where are they forecasting that to be back to near 2019 total? So that will help the budget and then also help downtown.
So I think transit ridership is supposed to come back in 2024 is the expectation. I think room taxes will clearly not be back until at least 2023, you know, based on what we're seeing so far. You know, certainly I think would be current expectation that would be in the ballpark of 2019 by sometime in 2023 or at least on a monthly basis, maybe early 2024. But one thing about that is for room taxes, for instance, you know, we expected, or the city expected, that 2021 would bring more of a recovery than it has. I think they were expected to hit maybe 13 million in 2021. And the current expectation is for 9 million. So again, the expectation is to start to bounce back by 23 or 24 in these areas. But, some of these things we just don't know. I mean, I think parking is a great example. I mean, is that going to return to what it was, or is there going to be more working from home? I mean, we'll see, right? I mean, I think there might be reason to think it will come back, but, just growth in the city and so on and so forth. But, some of this is uncharted territory, right? We can't look to the last pandemic as really a model for what is going to happen.
No, I think Mark Clear, which we should acknowledge, former alder, a member of the Destination Madison Board of Directors and head of their Community Relations Committee, brings up a good point that room tax depends considerably on what Epic does, which is why Madison is lagging other destinations. It's two points there. One, the power of Epic. You go to the airport, I was there just a few weeks ago. Every advertisement is for things that I have absolutely no idea what they are. Hamburgers or things that I understand. So clearly is geared towards that. As a member of the Dane County Airport Commission myself, we are, talking to Kim. Epic is having significant conversations about when they're going to come back in earnest and what that looks like. We're now back to 18 destinations, so things are picking up. But the bigger point I think that Mark is trying to make, and I'm sorry if I'm making Mark's point, is that we are such a business travel city as opposed to leisure travel. I think people think we're leisure travel, but really its backbone is in business and in conferences. World Area Expo, right? I mean, Val, everyone has sort of big example. Yep. And that makes a difference. And that is just taking longer.
Absolutely.
So I guess you can ask this, Jason, a question. Maybe I was totally off in my answer, but whatever.
No, it's great. This is a great group. And so I've, great. That's a great point, Mark. And maybe that's something for us to look into at some point as well.
I do know that I talked to Allie Westman Chen about your report. She read it. She was excited, well, not excited to see the information as the president and CEO of Destination Madison, but was thankful that you all were doing this work. Certainly, this is important. We got a few more minutes here. Any more questions for the other Jason, who can give you better answers than me? A quiz at 8:55, so sign off early if you don't want to participate in that. I'm just kidding. More questions? Bill, it looks like you're answering a question. You're asking a question, Bill? Can't tell. No.
Hey, Jason, can I make one shameless plug? And it's not really a plug, it's an invitation. The Wisconsin Policy Forum really is trying to broaden our focus on specific Madison and Dane County issues. So there's just an open invitation for this group that, to the extent that you see things out there that you think would be worthy of WPF research. We have limitations in our capacity, so I can't guarantee you we can jump into a huge project right away. But really, we have that type of relationship with the downtown business community in Milwaukee. We're so thankful to be building it with you folks. But it's a two-way street. And so again, one of the services that we can offer to you is the ability to tackle research on topics that you would find to be of value. So I just wanted to, again, mention that. And, I know Jason has Jason Ilstrup has his eyes on that, but wanted to make sure I noted that to the group.
Yeah, I want to echo that too. Rob and Jason have done a great job of trying to immerse themselves in the Madison community. I was part of a committee that was trying to do this right before COVID, and it sort of stopped a little bit, but they really truly want to become part of the community. Jason right now is sitting in Madison and doing this work.
That's fact.
Really want to work directly with them. So if we have research topics that we have as a group, us, the chamber, whoever it might be, important to get that information to them. All right. Since I said there was a quiz at 8:55, people are leaving the meeting with quickness here. Fine. Any last questions before we go? If not, we can adjourn a few minutes early, if that's okay with you, Chair Black.
That is good with me.
Mark Clear says he welcomes the quiz.
I bet Mark would do pretty well on it.
Yes. Yes, he would. Well, fantastic. All right. So a couple of quick announcements again from us at DMI. We have a big event in 2 days on the 4th. Come join us at the Overture Center at 9:45 or on Zoom at 10 o'clock for our State of the Downtown event. Please do check the website though, because there are COVID restrictions, vaccinations and whatnot. So please do pay attention there that the Overture Center will be helping us with. But great event. It's a really interesting report. So back onto more data. Please do join us there. Also, the Economic Development Committee will be meeting again on the 16th of November for a discussion on commercial real estate and the tech industry downtown. We also have a Government Relations Committee, an extra meeting because we missed last month, coming soon. I'm still trying to schedule that on redistricting, which was a topic that you all wanted to discuss. So that is coming soon. Just we're having some problems with the dates, but we will find one soon. All right. Huge thank you again to Jason Stein, Rob Hankin from the team at Wisconsin Policy Forum for the excellent work. You really are helping to keep our citizenry educated on what's going on with their budget. This is big time important stuff. So we are thankful for all the work you do here. Really do appreciate you speaking to both our Government Relations Committee and Economic Development Committee. So Jason, Rob, hopefully we'll see you both soon. Everyone have a great day and we'll see you downtown. Bye, everybody.
Thanks.